He called an alien woman beautiful. Her response left him stunned. What happened next was unbelievable. Elias Cade had spent most of his life studying languages, cultures, and diplomatic protocols, but nothing in his extensive training could have prepared him for the moment he first saw Vaylith. She was tall, her skin shimmering in subtle shades of silver and violet under the soft lights of the exchange hub. Her eyes held an intelligence and calmness that felt ancient, as if she had seen civilizations rise and fall while humans were still struggling with fire and words. Elias had been walking toward the central chamber, carrying a tablet of translation notes, when she approached. He had expected polite introductions, the careful measurement of words that always characterized interstellar diplomacy. What he did not expect was the sudden clarity of thought that made him speak from his heart instead of his mind. "You're beautiful," he said before he could stop himself. The words seemed to hang in the air, more tangible than anything else around them. Immediately the room went quiet. The ambient hum of distant engines faded, leaving only the silence between him and Vaylith. Elias' stomach sank. He had studied hundreds of alien protocols. None of them had mentioned that a simple compliment could cause such a disruption. Vaylith froze. For a moment her eyes widened, not in anger but in shock. Her posture stiffened as if the compliment had struck her in a way Elias could not understand. Around them, other aliens in the chamber began to whisper quietly in languages Elias could not translate. Some looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Do humans give such words freely?" she asked finally, her voice calm but charged with a subtle intensity. Her accent was soft, almost musical, and yet every syllable carried weight. Elias swallowed. He had expected questions, maybe even a reprimand for speaking out of turn, but not this. "Yes," he replied honestly. "Humans, we often say what we feel. We don't always hide our admiration. If someone or something seems remarkable, we speak it aloud. We don't need a ritual or a hierarchy to decide what is worth acknowledging." Vaylith's gaze lingered on him for longer than was comfortable. The silence stretched, drawing attention from the other diplomats. Elias could feel the weight of their scrutiny. He tried to remind himself that he had been trained for high-pressure situations, but this was different. This was not about negotiations, treaties, or translations. This was about a word, a simple word, and its meaning across an entire civilization. Finally, she spoke again, this time in a tone that was softer, almost thoughtful. "You have broken the pattern." Elias blinked. "Pattern?" Her eyes studied him, searching for something, and then she said, "In my people's culture, to call someone beautiful is not a casual act. It is reserved for those we recognize as legends, those who embody courage, wisdom, or extraordinary virtue. It is sacred." The chamber gasped lightly. Elias had not intended to commit any offense, but it seemed that he had stumbled into something far more serious than he realized. He tried to explain. "I didn't know, I just spoke honestly. I meant no disrespect. On Earth, we use the word to show admiration, nothing more." Vaylith considered him quietly, her face a mask of contemplation. Then she leaned slightly closer and said words that made his heart pound. "By saying this, you have initiated the rite of recognition." Elias' stomach turned over. "Rite of recognition?" "Yes," Vaylith replied. "It is an ancient practice. One cannot simply speak the word without consequence. It is meant to honor those who are extraordinary, and it cannot be undone." The other diplomats murmured among themselves. Elias could feel the tension building like a storm around him. He had inadvertently become the center of something monumental, and he did not even understand what it was yet. "Wait," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. This wasn't intentional. I don't even know what the rite entails." "Please, I am not trying to disrespect your culture." Vaylith raised a hand, and the room fell silent again. "Intentions matter little. The act itself is what counts. You have spoken a word that carries weight beyond your understanding. You have honored me and through me my people. Whether you wish to or not, the consequence is the same." Elias felt a cold sense of dread. He had traveled to countless planets, interacted with dozens of species, and faced situations that required every ounce of his diplomatic skill. And yet here he was, a single word potentially reshaping an entire civilization's perception of humanity. He tried to think fast. Perhaps if he explained more, the council or the assembly could forgive him. Perhaps there was a loophole or a precedent he could appeal to. But Vaylith's expression told him that nothing he said could change what had already occurred. "You do not yet understand." she continued, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. Your people are unusual. You speak from the heart without fear of judgment, without calculation. This is why humans are studied, observed, and often underestimated. You may not realize it, but you have reminded my people of something we believed lost, the courage to express genuine admiration freely. Elias blinked, trying to absorb her words. They were not angry, not condemning, but neither were they casual. They carried the weight of millennia of tradition and expectation. The assembly's leader, a tall being with translucent skin that reflected the hub's lights, stepped forward. Human, he said, his voice like a quiet vibration in the air, you have performed an act that cannot be ignored. You have unknowingly honored one of our greatest citizens. Protocol requires that we now conduct the inquiry of recognition. Elias' mind reeled. Inquiry. Recognition, he had heard of galactic tribunals, councils, and inquiries into diplomatic incidents. But this felt different. This was not a procedural formality. This was something ancient, something personal to the very essence of Valeth's species. An inquiry? Elias asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I don't know if you will participate, Valeth said, her tone firm but not hostile. This is not punishment. It is understanding, and through understanding you will show your worth, not as a diplomat but as a human, and perhaps as someone capable of reminding my people what it means to feel without restraint. The assembly members began to move, forming a path that led Elias and Valeth to a chamber he had not noticed before. The walls shimmered with faint holographic images of past rites, each one showing figures in moments of courage, honor, and wisdom. Elias tried to comprehend what he was seeing. Each image seemed to radiate an energy that was more than visual, more than historical. It felt almost alive, as if the past itself were watching. Valeth walked beside him, her steps measured, her presence both calming and commanding. Do not fear, she said quietly. This is not a trial of punishment. This is an opportunity for your species, and for mine to connect in ways we have long forgotten. Elias nodded, though uncertainty churned in his chest. He had no idea what this rite would involve, what questions would be asked, or how he could prove anything meaningful to a species whose history spanned millennia. All he knew was that he had spoken honestly, from the heart, and somehow that honesty had created ripples across an entire civilization. As they entered the chamber, the doors closed behind them with a soft hum, sealing them in. Elias felt a thrill of fear mixed with curiosity. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew one thing with certainty. Nothing in his life, in any diplomatic code he had learned, had ever prepared him for this. And somewhere deep inside, he realized that maybe, just maybe, this was exactly the kind of adventure he had been waiting for. Not one of conquest or power or politics, but one that reminded him why humans had survived, thrived, and mattered in the galaxy. The courage to speak the truth, the courage to admire, the courage to feel. Valeth turned to him once more. Her eyes held a spark he had never seen before in anyone else, a mixture of respect, wonder, and something almost like hope. Human, she said softly, let us begin. And with that, the chamber's lights dimmed, the holographic images shimmered brighter, and the rite of recognition, unintentionally initiated by a simple human compliment, began. The chamber was quiet, save for the soft hum of energy flowing through the walls and the faint echoes of long-forgotten histories projected across the shimmering surfaces. Elias Cade felt both anxious and strangely exhilarated. He had no idea what this rite of recognition would demand of him, only that he had been brought here for something beyond words, beyond treaties, beyond even diplomacy itself. Valeth walked beside him with a calm authority that grounded him, though he sensed the curiosity in her eyes. You must understand, she said quietly, that your species has done something almost impossible. Humans speak without hesitation. You do not fear judgment when expressing admiration or acknowledgement. That is remarkable in the eyes of my people. Elias tried to digest her words. So, I didn't offend anyone? He asked. His voice carried a nervous chuckle, though his stomach twisted with unease. You have not offended, Valeth said firmly. You have done something far more significant. You have reminded us of something we thought lost. And now the rite begins not as a trial, but as a revelation. Before Elias could respond, the chamber's walls shifted, projecting an enormous holographic display. Images of Valeth's people stretched across time, their cities rising in beauty, their scholars studying the stars, their leaders making difficult decisions, but all with a sense of emotional restraint that bordered on coldness. None of them had smiled openly. None had spoken words of admiration except in rare, ritualized ceremonies. "You see," Valeth said softly, "for generations we have measured achievement without feeling. We have recognized courage, wisdom, and virtue, but without expressing it freely. The rite you have triggered exists to remind us that recognition must be felt and spoken, not only calculated and recorded." Elias took a deep breath. "So, my compliment really matters," Valeth nodded, "more than you can imagine. And now the inquiry will show what your kind is capable of, what humanity has always been capable of, though often underestimated." The chamber shifted again, revealing a series of challenges, or perhaps more accurately opportunities. Each was designed to test understanding, empathy, and honesty. The first required Elias to describe what he admired in Valeth, not her appearance, but her courage, intelligence, and composure. He hesitated at first, unsure if he could express his thoughts clearly without offending some unspoken rule. But then he realized the answer was simple. He spoke honestly. "I admire that you do not hide who you are. You carry your history, your knowledge, and your presence without arrogance or fear. You make those around you aware of what is possible, not by force, but by example." Valeth's eyes softened. A faint shimmer passed over her face, like a ripple across a calm lake. The holographic images shifted again, now showing members of her species reacting to similar words in the past. Many had struggled, frozen, or retreated behind decorum and rules. But Elias' words had flowed naturally, without hesitation. The chamber pulsed with energy. A voice, resonant and measured, spoke from all around them. "Human, you have spoken from the heart. You have demonstrated the principle of recognition that we have long forgotten. Proceed." Elias' pulse quickened. Each step he took felt like moving through history itself, connecting with a civilization that had perfected knowledge but forgotten the power of acknowledgement. The next segment of the rite tested more than words. It required action. Through a projection, he saw a scenario of a planetary colony facing a moral dilemma, a critical decision that could save lives but would require extraordinary honesty and courage to resolve. The voice asked him to choose, knowing that the choice would reveal not just reasoning but the moral heart of humanity. Elias considered the situation carefully. He weighed logic, potential outcomes, and the welfare of the people involved, but always with an eye toward truth and integrity. Finally, he chose the path that was honest, courageous, and compassionate. Immediately, the projection shifted. The colony was saved, not through clever strategy alone, but because the leaders had been inspired to act by truth and trust. Valeth observed silently, her expression unreadable at first. Then a faint smile appeared, subtle but undeniable. "You see, human," she said, "your species does not merely survive by intellect or power. You influence others through authenticity. That is a form of strength we have not seen in centuries." The final stage of the rite was more abstract. Elias was asked to reflect on humanity itself, the flaws, the strengths, and the potential that had carried them from a small planet to the stars. He thought of resilience, curiosity, creativity, and courage. He thought of humans who dared to explore, to speak freely, to act honestly even when it was dangerous. And he realized that this was what the rite sought, recognition not just of one individual, but of a species capable of inspiring change. Elias spoke with clarity, his words echoing in the chamber. "Humans are not perfect. We make mistakes. We argue, fight, and stumble, but we strive. We speak truth, admire what is admirable, and act with courage when it matters most. We see potential in others and in ourselves, and we speak it aloud. That is who we are. That is our strength." The chamber pulsed once more. The holographic images shimmered, dissolving into a single beam of light that enveloped Valeth and Elias. The voice spoke again, warmer this time. "Human, through your honesty, you have reminded us of what we lost. You have awakened recognition, admiration, and courage in hearts long closed to feeling. Humanity shall be remembered, not for dominance, but for the ability to inspire." Valeth stepped closer, her gaze holding something that Elias had not seen before: gratitude, respect, and hope. "You have done more than speak words," she said. "You have reminded my people that emotion, honesty, and admiration are as powerful as knowledge or strategy. You have changed the way we will move forward." Elias felt a mix of relief and pride. He had entered this rite as a simple linguist, unsure of his place among advanced civilizations. Now he realized he had accomplished something extraordinary. Not by force, not by cunning, but by being human. The chamber doors opened slowly, revealing the assembly and other diplomats who had been watching. The air was filled with quiet murmurs of surprise and respect. Members of Valeth's species approached, nodding in acknowledgement, some even offering subtle gestures of honor. "You have succeeded," the assembly leader said. "Humanity is unlike any species we have encountered, not for technology, not for weapons, but for heart. Your actions today will be remembered across the galaxy." Valeth turned to Elias once more. "Do you understand now?" she asked gently. "The word you spoke, the word that caused such fear, was not just a compliment, it was a bridge. You reminded us that words can inspire, that honesty can awaken strength, and that admiration is a power in itself." Elias nodded, speechless. He realized that something simple, something human, had reshaped the perception of an entire civilization. A single word, spoken honestly, had ignited a chain of events that would echo through generations. The assembly stepped back, giving Elias space. Valeth offered a small, genuine smile, and for the first time he saw her express a feeling openly, without restraint or calculation. It was a smile that carried history, understanding, and hope. As he prepared to leave the chamber, Elias felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had not set out to achieve greatness. He had only chosen honesty, courage, and admiration. And yet, in doing so, he had proven the quiet power of humanity, the ability to inspire, to connect, and to awaken what others had forgotten. Outside the chamber, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vastness of the universe. Elias knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity's journey among the stars was not defined by conquest or fear, but by the capacity to touch hearts, to speak truth, and to recognize beauty in all its forms. Valeth stood beside him, her gaze on the distant constellations. "Your species is remarkable," she said softly. "Do not ever forget the power of what you are." Elias smiled, a mixture of humility and pride. "I won't," he replied, "and I think you've reminded me that we are capable of more than we ever realize. Maybe that's what makes humans dangerous, but in a good way." Valeth laughed lightly, the sound like music echoing across the stars. "Yes," she said, "dangerous in the way that truth and courage always are." As the exchange hub continued its quiet hum, Elias walked away with a sense of purpose and a renewed understanding. The galaxy was vast, filled with species, cultures, and challenges. But he knew now that humanity had something no other species could replicate: the courage to feel, the courage to speak, and the courage to inspire without fear. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the universe, a civilization that had long forgotten how to admire and recognize greatness had been awakened, not by laws, rules, or decrees, but by a human who simply spoke honestly, who dared to call another beautiful, and who reminded them of what it meant to feel. The stars shone brighter that night, and for Elias Cade, the universe suddenly felt a little smaller, and infinitely more full of possibility. Elias Cade returned to his quarters aboard the exchange hub, but sleep eluded him. His mind was alive with thoughts of what had transpired during the rite of recognition. He had expected formalities, lectures on protocol, or perhaps even a mild reprimand. Instead, he had witnessed something extraordinary, a civilization awakening to feelings long forgotten, sparked by nothing more than honesty and admiration. He walked to the window and gazed out at the stars, their light stretching across the void. The galaxy felt different now, as if the constellations themselves were aware of the subtle changes happening in countless worlds. Elias could not know all the consequences, but a deep intuition told him that humanity's presence in the universe was about to shift. Valeth entered silently, her steps graceful, carrying the quiet authority that always seemed to surround her. She stood beside him, looking at the stars with the same intensity he felt. "You have given my people something rare," she said softly. "Not guidance, not orders, but a reminder that to recognize truth and beauty openly is a strength. That is a dangerous power, and yet it is the most important gift a species can give." Elias looked at her, trying to process the magnitude of her words. I didn't even know what I was doing, I just spoke honestly, but it seems it's more than words can explain." Valeth nodded. "Exactly. You have acted in a way my species no longer remembers how to act, and your actions will echo further than you realize." Days passed, and the exchange hub became a center of quiet but profound change. Delegates from other civilizations who had observed the rite began to study humanity differently. Scientists, diplomats, and even military strategists approached Elias, not to question his methods, but to understand the principles that guided them. Humans, it seemed, had an unusual combination of courage, honesty, and empathy, qualities that made them unpredictable and therefore influential in the galaxy. Elias was summoned to a council meeting composed of representatives from 10 different star systems. The chamber was vast, with walls of polished crystal and floors that seemed to ripple like water. Holographic displays showed the locations of countless colonies, research stations, and ships. But it was the council members themselves who commanded attention. Beings of unimaginable variety, from beings of pure energy to towering creatures with scales that shimmered like gemstones. "You have caused a remarkable shift," said the leader, a being with translucent skin and eyes that reflected the galaxy itself. "Your species speaks freely, admires openly, and acts with integrity. In doing so, you have reminded civilizations that feeling and recognition are not weaknesses, but forms of influence and strength. We wish to understand this, humanity." Elias swallowed. This was not what he had expected when he first boarded the exchange hub as a linguist. I don't know if I can explain it," he said honestly. "Humans admire what we see as worthy, speak what we feel, and act with courage. We do not calculate influence. We just try to do what is right." Valith placed a hand lightly on his arm. "That is enough," she said. "Your species has always inspired more than it realizes, and now the galaxy is beginning to see it." The council studied him in silence for a moment, and then the leader nodded. "We wish to extend an invitation," it said, "not as a formality but as a partnership. Humanity shall be included in an alliance dedicated to ethical development, cultural exchange, and the sharing of knowledge across the stars. Your presence will guide others toward balance, courage, and integrity." Elias' mind raced. He had never considered that humans might have such a role beyond their small system, beyond their technology or resources. We would be honored," he said finally, his voice steady. "We will do our best." Valith smiled at him, her expression reflecting pride. "You have already done more than you know. You have shown that humanity's greatest power is not in weapons, not in technology, but in honesty, admiration, and courage." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Elias traveled to multiple worlds alongside Valith, witnessing civilizations long stagnant rediscovering the importance of recognition and open admiration. In one case, a planet that had been on the brink of civil war found a resolution simply because leaders took the time to acknowledge each other's efforts and strengths. In another, a species that had abandoned art and music for efficiency discovered again that beauty and creativity could inspire action and unity. Elias realized that the galaxy itself was changing, subtly but irrevocably. Humanity, by merely being authentic and honest, had become a catalyst. They had reminded the universe that strength was not only in control or conquest, but in courage, recognition, and the ability to speak truth without fear. On a quiet night aboard a transport vessel, Valith and Elias stood together looking out at a nebula that glowed in shades of green and gold. "Do you ever worry," Elias asked, "that humans might not be ready for such responsibility?" Valith considered him carefully. "Responsibility is not given by others, Elias. It is defined by actions. Humanity has shown that when it acts with honesty, courage, and admiration, it inspires others. That is readiness. That is influence. That is leadership in its purest form." Elias felt a swell of pride mixed with humility. He thought of Earth, with all its flaws and triumphs, and realized that despite its imperfections, it had produced beings capable of affecting the galaxy in profound ways. And he thought of Valith, whose species had been on the brink of emotional stagnation, now rediscovering the power of feeling. "Thank you," he said softly, "for trusting me and for showing me that something as simple as honesty can change the universe." Valith's eyes glimmered. "No, human, thank you. You reminded us that emotion is not weakness. It is the force that shapes civilizations, and you reminded me." Elias smiled, a quiet, satisfied smile. He understood now that the journey of humanity among the stars was not about power, dominance, or conquest. It was about connection, influence, and the courage to be genuine, even when no one else expected it. Months passed, and Elias continued his work, traveling from system to system, witnessing the slow but undeniable ripple of change. Humans were no longer seen as merely another young species trying to survive. They were admired, studied, and respected for their courage, their honesty, and their ability to inspire. Valeth remained a close companion, her respect for humanity, and for Elias personally, growing with every shared experience. Together, they helped guide other civilizations toward understanding, not by dictating actions, but by showing the power of words spoken with honesty and admiration. One day, while observing a newly formed colony on a distant world, Elias realized something profound. Humanity's journey among the stars was not defined by grand battles or dramatic conquests. It was defined by the quiet courage to speak the truth, to acknowledge the worth in others, and to act with integrity. These small actions, repeated across time and space, had the power to change entire civilizations. He thought back to the moment when he had first called Valeth beautiful. A simple, honest compliment had set in motion a chain of events that had awakened a civilization, influenced a council of alien leaders, and created alliances that would shape the galaxy for generations. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest actions held the greatest power. Valeth stood beside him, her eyes reflecting the twin suns rising over the colony. "Your species is remarkable," she said quietly. "You have shown the universe that courage and honesty can inspire far more than force or technology ever could." Elias looked at her and nodded. I think humanity is finally starting to understand that too. That we can shape the galaxy not just with our minds or machines, but with our hearts." Valeth smiled. "And we will remember it. Your actions, your words, your courage, they will be remembered not just in stories, but in the hearts of civilizations. That is the true power of humanity." Elias felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of pride and hope. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species, worlds, and challenges. But he knew now that humanity had a role unlike any other, to inspire, to connect, and to awaken what others had long forgotten. As the twin suns rose, casting light across the colony, Elias realized that his journey was far from over. There would be more worlds to visit, more civilizations to inspire, and more moments where honesty, admiration, and courage could change everything. And he would continue to act as he always had, with sincerity, with integrity, and with the quiet knowledge that even the smallest words could ripple across the stars. The universe had been vast and indifferent, but now, through simple truth and human courage, it felt alive and full of possibility. Elias Cade took a deep breath, feeling the weight and the wonder of it all. Humanity had awakened more than a civilization. It had awakened a principle, a force that could echo across galaxies. And in that realization, he felt both humility and determination. He looked at Valeth one last time before turning back to the horizon. "Let's continue," he said softly. "There's so much more to do." Valeth nodded. "Yes, and humanity will show the way." Together they walked forward, their steps quiet but certain, ready to face a universe that had never expected humans to shape it with honesty, courage, and the power of admiration. And somewhere deep in the stars, civilizations that had long forgotten how to feel were beginning to remember, thanks to one human who dared to speak from the heart. Elias Cade had never expected that a simple compliment could lead to something so extraordinary. Yet, months after the rite of recognition, the consequences of his words continued to unfold. The galaxy, vast and indifferent for so long, was beginning to notice humans, not for their technology, not for their military strength, but for their courage, honesty, and the way they could inspire change simply by being genuine. He traveled with Valeth to another star system, one that had long been isolated from interstellar politics. The planet, Viridian, was rich in minerals and resources, but had been struggling under rigid hierarchies that stifled creativity and innovation. Its leaders had grown distrustful, believing that emotion and admiration were weaknesses. Elias had heard reports that Viridian's colonies were stagnating, and he suspected that his presence and humanity's reputation might spark change. As the transport vessel descended toward the planet's surface, Elias gazed at the vast city below. The architecture was precise and imposing, with towering spires and angular structures, but it lacked warmth. The people moved with purpose, but their faces were expressionless, their interactions strictly transactional. It reminded him of the early holograms from Valeth's Right, civilizations that had forgotten the power of recognition and feeling. Valeth leaned slightly toward him. This world will test your ability to inspire without force. Observe carefully, speak honestly, and remember that even small words can ignite change. Elias nodded. He had learned from the Right that humanity's power often lay in subtlety. It was not through domination or persuasion that humans changed the galaxy. It was through honesty, courage, and the willingness to acknowledge others. They were greeted by the planet's council in a massive chamber, its walls covered with intricate carvings depicting Viridian's history. The council members were tall and thin, their skin patterned like the mineral veins beneath their feet. They regarded Elias and Valeth with suspicion, their movements precise and deliberate. "You come from the hub," one of the council members said, its voice low and mechanical, "and you claim to represent a species known for unusual behavior. What is your purpose here?" Elias stepped forward, feeling the weight of the council's gaze. "I am not here to demand or to lead," he said. "I am here to share what humanity has learned, that courage, honesty, and recognition, speaking truth and admiration openly, can change civilizations for the better. Your people are capable of innovation, creativity, and cooperation, but only if you allow yourselves to feel and acknowledge the strengths around you." The council members exchanged silent glances, their expressions unreadable. Elias continued, his voice steady. "I speak from experience. In my travels, I have seen civilizations that stagnated because they forgot the power of admiration and honesty. I have seen species rediscover creativity and cooperation simply because someone spoke the truth with courage. That is what I offer, a reminder, not a command." Valeth watched silently, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and hope. Elias' words were simple, but they carried the same honesty that had sparked the Right months ago. He could see the council beginning to consider his perspective, their rigid postures softening slightly. One of the younger council members, a being with iridescent skin that changed color with emotion, stepped forward hesitantly. "You speak of courage and admiration," it said, its tone uncertain. "But how do we know it is not weakness? How do we know that your words are not manipulation?" Elias smiled gently. "I have no power over you. I cannot command your actions, but I can speak honestly. If you choose to recognize the strengths around you, to value honesty and courage, you will find solutions that no hierarchy or law can enforce. That is the difference between force and influence. Influence comes from truth, honesty, and the willingness to inspire others." The council was silent. Elias could feel the tension in the room, but he also felt a subtle shift, curiosity. The youngest member's color patterns changed rapidly, a clear sign of inner reflection. The other members remained cautious, but they were listening. Valeth placed a hand lightly on Elias' arm. "Now," she said softly, "show them what humans do naturally. Act without fear and let your example speak." Elias nodded. He glanced around the chamber and noticed several projects displayed holographically, engineering designs, energy grids, and urban planning concepts. All were technically brilliant, but lacked imagination or adaptability. He stepped toward one of the displays. "Your designs are impressive," he said, "but they are rigid. Humans often approach challenges differently. We combine logic with creativity. We take risks based on insight and collaboration. I see potential here, but only if you allow yourselves to try new methods and encourage others to contribute openly." A murmur spread through the council chamber. Some members shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned forward, intrigued. Elias continued, pointing to a complex energy grid. "This system is efficient, yes, but what if it could be more resilient if engineers could experiment without fear of failure? What if recognition for innovative ideas was not only allowed but celebrated? Imagine a civilization where success and failure are both acknowledged as steps toward improvement. That is how humans grow, and that is how we inspire others." The youngest council member stepped closer, its color patterns stabilizing into a vibrant green. You speak of freedom with responsibility," it said. "You speak of encouragement without hierarchy. Is this truly how your species operates?" Elias nodded. "Yes, we make mistakes, but we learn from them. We admire those who act with courage. We speak openly about what we value, and through honesty, collaboration, and recognition, we achieve more than we could alone." Valeth's eyes softened, and a faint smile appeared on her face. She had seen the same spark in countless civilizations since the rite. Elias was not just speaking words. He was demonstrating humanity's approach to life, and the council was beginning to understand. Another council member, older and more reserved, spoke for the first time. We have lived by rules and hierarchy for centuries. Emotion has been seen as weakness, yet I feel a change. I see the possibility of progress through recognition, collaboration, and honesty. The chamber fell silent, but the tension had shifted. Elias could feel the cautious optimism spreading through the council. He realized that this was the true measure of influence, not immediate obedience, but the planting of a seed that could grow over time. Valith stepped forward, addressing the council with authority. This human has demonstrated what your species has forgotten, the power of courage, honesty, and recognition. Observe, learn, and consider what you can achieve when you allow these principles to guide you. Elias felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had not commanded, forced, or manipulated. He had simply acted as he always had, honestly, openly, and with courage. And the council, for the first time in generations, was considering a future shaped by inspiration rather than fear. Over the following weeks, changes began to take root on Viridian. Council meetings became more open, with members encouraged to acknowledge the strengths and insights of their colleagues. Engineers experimented with new designs, sharing successes and failures alike. Communities began to collaborate more freely, inspired by the idea that recognition and honesty could create strength, not weakness. Elias watched these changes with quiet pride. He knew that humanity's influence was subtle but powerful. By speaking honestly, acting with courage, and recognizing the worth in others, humans could inspire transformations that no weapon, treaty, or law could achieve. One evening, as Elias and Valith walked through a garden in the council's central district, the twin moons of Viridian rose, casting silver light across the city. The air was calm, and Elias could see small groups of citizens interacting in ways that were unfamiliar just weeks ago. They were smiling, discussing ideas openly, and even acknowledging each other's achievements, a small revolution of honesty and recognition. Valith looked at him, her expression reflecting pride and hope. "You have done more than influence a council," she said. "You have begun to change the culture of an entire planet. That is no small feat, human." Humanity's strength lies in these simple acts: honesty, courage, and admiration. Elias nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He had not set out to lead, to conquer, or to dominate. He had simply spoken honestly, admired what was worthy, and acted with courage. And in doing so, he had reminded an entire world of the power that humans carried within themselves. As they walked, Elias realized that this was the essence of humanity's journey among the stars. It was not about empire or wealth, nor about advanced technology alone. It was about connection, influence, and the courage to act with integrity and admiration. Every honest word, every act of recognition, every moment of courage rippled outward, touching lives and shaping civilizations. He looked at Valith, and for the first time he saw not just an ally or a companion, but a partner in a mission greater than either of them. Together they could continue to inspire, guide, and awaken civilizations across the galaxy, not through force, but through the quiet, enduring power of humanity. Elias smiled, feeling a deep sense of purpose. The galaxy was vast, filled with challenges, wonders, and opportunities. But now he understood the simple truth that had guided humans for millennia: courage, honesty, and admiration could change everything. And somewhere across the stars, civilizations that had long forgotten the power of recognition were beginning to remember. Elias Cade took a deep breath, feeling the vastness of the galaxy and the potential of his species. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. But through simple truth, quiet courage, and heartfelt recognition, they were beginning to shape the universe in ways no one had expected. And in that realization, Elias felt both humility and determination. Humanity's journey among the stars was only beginning, and he was ready to walk that path, with honesty, courage, and the quiet power of admiration lighting the way.